Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining Encore Palm Beach County for our monthly Zoom event. Today we have a special guest, Dan Hafetz. He's the National Recruiting Director, Interim Resources at StevenDouglas, an executive search firm based in Sunrise, Florida. And he is going to speak to us about how the digital world has changed the way we look for jobs. And without further ado, Dan, take it away.
Thank you, everybody. I want to first, I was always told by a lot of people that respect me that I have a face for radio. So no laughing at what you're looking at. Without further ado, so in starting this presentation, I want you to sort of imagine being thirsty but never having anything to drink. And then I kind of say, well, imagine being in a position where you hear about an ideal job but have absolutely no idea how to get it. And that's really the basis for my presentation today, and hopefully it'll be more interactive. But my goal is really to kind of create a sort of some good, bad, and indifferent of how you should go about a productive job search in the digital age. What I'll start with is that I think that a lot of people make mistakes thinking that their only relevant opportunity is to basically send out resumes to job boards and or just applying to any job that's listed online. There are a lot of different job boards out there. You've got Career Builder, and you've got, all the niche providers, and you've got Monster, and you've got all these different engines. And quite frankly, they're probably all aimed at doing the same thing. But what's important about them is that, in some cases, you can't just define your job search through these job boards. It's really important that there's a process by which you go about doing this, where it's going to be a productive and least frustrating kind of experience. Because when you navigate, you're going to see that there's, you might apply to 500 different jobs and you're not getting any callbacks. There's a reason why. And I still think that the number one thing that you have to do in looking for a new job, especially as we get older and are, we don't become the most ideal candidate for jobs anymore, is that we have to kind of create a difference in how we look to other organizations and how we're able to get to those organizations to give us the opportunity to be hired. Like they said, I'm Dan Hafetz. I'm with StevenDouglas. We are an executive search and professional-based services organization. We're national by scope. We have offices in 20 markets across the country, but we were started here back in 1984 in South Florida. And our primary focus back then was doing nothing but executive search for accounting and finance professionals. We have since broken out of that, and we have, a pretty large, diversified portfolio of services that we provide that are outside of accounting and finance as well. I happen to run the project-based professional services group here at StevenDouglas, where we hire people who choose to do project-based work as a career. Who can go out and actually support our clients for various, different projects and needs around the organization. So that's who we are. And again, I think that by virtue of being in this business for 25 years, I've sort of gained some expertise in how to do things properly when you're looking for a job. I think in a way to do this more productively, I think the first thing that you have to identify is, number one, what's your skill set? And then who are the companies out there, whether you just determine that you can get a job anywhere because of a lot of remote opportunities that have popped up since the pandemic started. and or whether or not it's something that's local to your community or something like that. So the first thing I would say is, before you do any job board search, is you have to really get a basis understanding of what you're looking for, what you're looking to do. And what I mean by that is that you actually can go back and say, all right, I'm a mechanic, a car mechanic, whatever that may be. Well, there are 20 companies probably in your backyard that do that. But who are those 20 companies? Before you start searching for a job, you should know as much as you can about 10 to 20 job or 10 to 20 companies that maybe you'd want to go to work for. And I would delve into it and look to do as much research as possible of those companies, because you want to be prepared when the time comes that you kind of have a pretty good understanding of what that company does, why they do what they do, how they do it, and why you might be a really good person to join their team and for what reason. And I think a lot of people forget to do that, because I think it's important that you have a navigable list of possible potential employers rather than just letting the web define that for you. So that's number one. Number two, I think in any job search, it's a full-time job. So if you're looking for a job, you know, one of the things you want to do is every day go out to the various job boards and look at what jobs are being posted. And making sure that you read the job description so you get a really good understanding whether or not you're qualified for that job. What the internet has done is it allows anybody to apply for any job without any qualification. And now some of these boards have certain, backdoor or back engine kind of things that will allow a lot of those resumes not necessarily to get to the organizations that are actually posting for those jobs, but it's not infallible. Just as everything we know about the internet is not infallible. But by the same token, you don't want to just apply to a job without having a true understanding of what the job is and why you're applying for that job and why that company is a company that you really want to go to work for. So the first thing, like I said, is you got to research these organizations and build yourself a list of 10 to 20 companies that you can effectively now use as your model to go about getting and searching for that job. I do agree. If you're looking for a job, it's always good to see what jobs are being posted. And you can actually include those in the list because they might be the ideal job for you. What I don't suggest you do is just putting your resume out there for people to see, because nobody's just going to go out into a resume database and just look at a resume on Monster. They generally, these organizations do not have the time or the resources to be able to go through. They not only are getting so many resumes for those organizations just because job boards make it easier that way, they're getting candidates that are not qualified for any of the jobs that are listed. But there are certain jobs that they continue to look for on a regular basis, and therefore they're going to put ads out there constantly because, number one, it enhances their brand by putting themselves out there. When Coca-Cola it always posts jobs because they want you to say, I'm on the Coca-Cola website. They see Coca-Cola in their job descriptions, and now you're thinking about going to buy that. You're thirsty and want to get a drink of Diet Coke. So it's important that you recognize what those things are. It's funny. I've been in this business for 25 years, and they said when the internet came out, and when all these different career sites came out, that it was going to wipe out the executive search business. And I'm telling you that we've never been more busy in our lives. And the last 10 years, I can't say that we've ever experienced a real lull, other than in 2008 when the financial crisis happened. And then again, maybe when the pandemic happened. But we as a company, and we get paid to put people in jobs. I have the pleasure of being in a business where I can change, where I have the impact to change people's lives on a daily basis. And I'm empowered to do that. And I thank, my lucky stars that I have the ability to do that for other people. And we get paid for that. And that's because clients really are having a struggle to themselves in dealing with the digital age and dealing with the number of resumes that come into their databases that they have to look at for a particular job. And there's not enough HR recruitment managers within those organizations to be able to handle the number of jobs that they have. So they come to us and they say, we need somebody, and we need somebody to do a dedicated search, and they pay us a lot of money to do that. And then if they're in a situation where they need some project support, that's where I come in, and they pay us a lot of money to have people come in and help them out for a period of time to get a project completed and out the door. And that's kind of what we do. In terms of, continuing down this path of building a productive and, job, search opportunity here. Now that you have that 10 to 20 organizations built, now you've got to really look at your online presence yourself. And the first place you got to go is LinkedIn. And for professionals, that's where you go, is LinkedIn. And think of LinkedIn as your brand. This is you. You have the ability to put out, your skill sets in some sort of an organized fashion. You have the ability to at least define what you are and what your skill sets are. It also is your conduit for getting a network built. And my hopes are that you've already done that. And I look at it, people of the years, 50 and above, we didn't do a great job of networking and making sure that we kept in touch with all the people we've worked with, who we've influenced and who have influenced us, because they're all a part of that group of people that can be part of your network that could help you. And if you haven't built that network on LinkedIn, that's a great place to start. And it's kind of creating your profile, and it's pretty self-explanatory, and there's certainly tutorials on how to build yourself and build your brand. But you have to be active on LinkedIn. I can't tell you how important, regardless of all the technology that's out there right now, the number one way to get a job is through your network. And it's through whatever network you can use to help you. And so when I say you have this group of now 10 to 20 companies, now what you do is you take that and you say, all right, well, who in my network works for those companies or has a contact within those companies so that I can ensure that my resume gets to the right person. And it doesn't matter if it's the janitor of that organization or the CEO or the CEO's wife or the software engineer that works there. It doesn't matter. Somebody has some influence within that organization that can help you, instead of just being a piece of paper or an applicant that was sent in through a tracking system, and it personalizes it, and now you're referred by somebody within the organization. There's nothing more important than that. So instead of just going out there and seeing what jobs are out there, now you have this list of jobs, you have a list of companies that you may want to go to work for. Look at the jobs that those companies are hiring for as well. And now you have a blueprint for how you can get your resume in the hands of people that will look at it. Because I'm telling you, if I put a job out for something like mine, let's say, I might get 4,000 resumes. 3,800 are not qualified at all for what that job description is about, because it's too easy to just apply. So understand that these organizations just don't have the capacity to go through all those resumes to find the short ones. Now, granted, their applicant tracking systems will probably create the need, and we'll go to that in a second here, but it's so important that you build that network and you use that network appropriately. You can't imagine how important it is to talk to people, because people have information, and you want to talk to people. You don't want to be talking to a resume website. That's not a conversation. So the more you talk to people, the more you listen to what they're saying, and not so much about what you're out to get, but more importantly, thinking about some things that you can talk about when you have the opportunity to get in touch with somebody within that organization. I always say to the people that I deal with, because I deal with a lot of, C-level executives, I say, you've earned the right to pick up the phone and call the CEO or the CFO of an organization and be able to have a conversation with them. And I'm not saying you bother them, but you have to have an idea how they can help you and how you might be able to help them. Doesn't mean asking for a job. It means knowing enough about what they're doing and why they're doing it and why you're interested in that organization to be able to say to them, I'm calling today because, hey, I'm doing a project where I'm trying to, for another organization, and I'm so respecting what you guys did with X. And I'd love to pick your brain a little bit on how you did it so that I can maybe use some of that as I help my client try to, to do what you guys are trying to do. You can't imagine, people love to talk about themselves and their accomplishments. And the more you listen, the more you're going to develop a relationship and asking good questions. And all of a sudden, instead of it being a call for a job, now you're getting them 15 minutes on the phone to talk about their business. And at the end of that conversation, it's so easy to say, I've always respected your organization. I'd love it, if there was ever an opportunity where you saw that I could be a fit, I'd be glad to talk to you about it. And now you've built a contact. So I can't tell you how important LinkedIn is as a tool, and as a tool for using it to the extent where you can actually use it to identify the people who are going to get your resume into the hands of the people that you want it to be in addition to being able to contact people who you want to learn about, you want to hear about, you respect what they do, you respect what their visions are, how they did something. The web is a great source of information, and it tells you how they did certain things and how they arrived at a decision. And being able to ask them how they arrived at that decision, they love to talk about themselves. They don't want to hear about us. They want to hear about, they love to hear about themselves talk, and you being able to ask good questions is going to prepare them that you're somebody that listens, you're somebody that's interested in what they do. There's just a wide range of things that you could talk about. So that's sort of my in terms of using LinkedIn and using the technologies. I think I should spend a little bit of time just kind of talking about these applicant tracking systems and really how to use them. When you do apply for a job, whether you do it through LinkedIn or whatever, it's important to understand that these applicant tracking systems today, they have keywords that are really important. So when you look at a job description and you look at your skill set, it's really important that you have a pretty good idea of 5 to 10 keywords that you want to include, not only in a cover letter, but also on the resume, to ensure that those keywords are going to be highlighted when you actually apply through a job board or through a job posting. Because that's what's going to weed out the people that are not qualified versus the ones that are. Because these applicant tracking systems that companies use, they have the technology in hand to be able to search a resume. If I was the hiring manager, I could go in and type in these 5 to 10 keywords, and it's only going to bring up those keyword people with the resume that have the keywords. So you might be the best candidate out there for this job, but you might never get seen by the hiring managers because you didn't include some of these keywords. The second thing is to understand that once this resume goes through an applicant tracking system, somebody will look at it, which means you got to make sure there aren't any grammatical errors and spelling errors. Microsoft Word is not enough to correct all those mistakes. So, send it to a friend or someone else just to review it so that you're not just, going blurry-eyed looking at your resume 400 times. just so that somebody can look at it and say, okay, no, everything looks good. It's edited and everything's spelled correctly, and all that's good. And make sure that if you do send a resume, do it in a doc file, rather like a Word doc, rather than a PDF, because sometimes PDF doesn't allow for search capability as well as Microsoft Word might. So that's also important. So you want to optimize your resume as best you can. And I think what's really important to understand is that resumes are not a legal document. So these resumes should be concise, and they should be very organized in terms of the way they're set up, meaning that they should have a very easy if I'm the reader, if you're looking at it from a reader's perspective, what should it look like? It should be straightforward. It should be very easy to read. You have your chronology of jobs. You have your education listed properly. You have your technical skills listed properly. But you just want it to be organized in a way that it's not confusing. It's very easy for the reader to understand. And that's really the most important thing about a resume. I mean, it's important. There are other things about resumes. We can go into that. That could be a whole other discussion about just resume writing. But don't overthink it. It's not that to be overthunk. It's really something that's a tool to really help you or help an employer get an understanding of why you're best. That you have the requisite skills for that job. We'll go back to the job boards a little bit. I know there's a lot of them out there. I think LinkedIn is a great one because it doesn't cost anybody to I guess you can go into the details of it. Yes, you can pay premiums and create ways that you could identify people quicker and things of that nature. But LinkedIn is a great one. Indeed is always good. Zipper, all of them are good. But I find that instead of going to the more generalized ones, Career Builder, whatever, is that there are some niche job boards that specialize in an industry or field. And I think that when you have a specific skill set, those sites are probably going to be more relevant just because these are companies that are hiring people like you, right? And just going back to my point about, networking is that, studies will show, and they have shown, that you're 10 times more likely to land a job when your application is accompanied by a referral. It's just common fact. And that's why, as much as the digital age has created this new wave of opportunity for you to get your resume in front of more people, it's also becoming more difficult for these organizations to sift through the resumes for the qualified people for those jobs. So that's why it's still important that you build your network and be able to utilize that network to the fullest extent you can. And it's an 80-20 rule. If I have 2,100 contacts in my LinkedIn, it's an 80-20 rule. Of that 2,100, I probably have 40 or 40 to 100 of people that I would consider are always going to do what I ask of them. The other 80%, they don't care. They're not going to care about what I do, why I do it. They're not going to help me in any way, shape, or form. So you have to remember that you got to focus on that 20%. That doesn't mean you can't ask for a referral to somebody within an organization. Like I said, if you use your network and you go outside of just your defined network, you have access to everybody's second and third degree, their second degree contacts. Can they get you in, into get your resume in front of the right person? They may say no. And a lot of that 80% might not even look at it, but the 20% will help you. And you'd be surprised at how unbelievably receptive people are on LinkedIn just by asking for help in any way, shape, or form. But I have to say, you got to swallow your pride, because I kind of look at it like, hey, I've been in business and I've been in the business world for 30 years. If I had done it over again, I would have kept in touch with every person that I influenced and every person that influenced me. because those are going to be those potential contacts that are going to be part of your 20%. Because if you've built a good enough, if you made a big enough impact on those people, whether you work for them or they work for you, they're going to do what it is you want their help with. So I kind of encourage you to go back and swallow your pride and go back and try to get back in touch with all these other people. It doesn't mean you're asking for a job. It's just basically saying, I want to build my network. It's my goal this year to get back in touch with all the people that made an impact on me and that I made an impact on others. And that's all you have to say. And they're going to be so receptive, especially when you have the opportunity to engage with them. So, I think that's an important feature in all of this. And I would say it's a longer term sort of a link to a job, but the more people you start to build that network with, the more opportunity there's going to be just because you're networked with them. So go back, look at the people, and don't be afraid to reach out, and understand that some of the people that work for you are now, the C-suite of organizations that you respect and identify with. Well, now they're the people that are going to hire you, even though they worked for you at a period of time. I would think that that's a great legacy, knowing that one of the people that worked for you that you mentored through your career has gotten to the level where they can make a direct impact on whether or not to bring you into an organization or not. So the power of that is really important. In terms of just kind of funneling out this whole job search, kind of workshop, if you will, you got to be organized with your jobs. You should have a list or a Google Doc of all the contacts you've made, who you talked to, who you sent your resume to, any phone numbers, anybody that you've spoken to within that organization. And you got to build like a date to follow up. I mean, no one's getting a job by just sending a resume to a job site. It's just not happening. So you have to be able to follow up and be able to understand how you can get to the right people to do that follow-up. So like I suggested before, if you can find somebody within your network that can influence getting your resume to the right people in that organization, is far more effective than applying to a job online. Secondarily, if you're into professional and you're working with search firms like ours, understand that if you apply to a job that we could represent you on, if you've already applied to that job, I can't represent you on that job anymore. I might be able to influence it by telling the hiring manager, hey, you're going to get a resume from Rosemary, who I think is excellent for this job. I can't represent her because her resume is already there. But like I said, we might get, we're involved in a lot of, exclusive and confidential searches that we have an influence on and that you may never see out on the job boards. So that's why we get paid a lot of money for the things that we do. So albeit, I think that, building a follow-up plan, I think the one thing about, applying to jobs online without really knowing who those jobs are with is that a lot of times you're going to get called by recruiters who, for better or for worse, they have a quota that they have to fill. So they, if I was hiring young, startup recruiters, there's not a lot of barrier to entry to that. But if they're willing to pick up the phone and call people and, dial for dollars, that's what they're doing. They want to set up an invitation to you to join their team or to come in and hear about the opportunities that they have. You could spend all day talking to recruiters. Not really effective. I'd say you pick one or two that may have influenced you over the course of your career, where you know that person is going to help you in any way, shape, or form. But for the most part, you won't want to necessarily be spending all of your time driving to a recruiter's office to talk to them and hear about all the jobs that they have that they're never going to let you apply for, or that they're telling you that they're going to represent you, but they won't. So you got to kind of deal with people that you've dealt with and know and who've influenced you in the past, pick one or two or three search firms maybe where you could say they've always done by me the way that I've always done by them, and I trust them. I think they're looking out for my best interest, not just for putting dollars in their pocketbooks. It's just not effective. So, it's important that you understand that. And I know that job searching is really difficult, and it's like a full-time job looking for a job. But if you can do it right, you can make it, more productive and less frustrating. Because there's nothing more frustrating than sending out 500 resumes and not getting anything back. And something's got to change. And that's why I say the networking piece is huge. I would never put my resume out on a database that lets anybody search for it. Because every search firm like us, any young recruiter that just started in the business is going to go to that list and start making phone calls on that list of people that have posted their resume, whether they have jobs for them or not, because they have a quota to fill. So, like I said, I would do a much more thorough job of researching these companies, researching the jobs, understanding how your skill set is going to match up with those job descriptions, and being able to get your resume into the hands of the people that are going to be making those decisions so that you're not wasting your time. That's about it in terms, there's, like I said, we can have discussions about every aspect of this in full detail, but it's not necessarily productive. My goal here is to get you to ask some questions that might be relevant. And like I told Rosemary and Christine at the start of this, I may not know all the answers to the questions, but I'll certainly do my best in helping to at least find out if I don't know the answer. But I'm opening it up at this point for any questions that you might have. If I look at Eduardo's first comment, how do companies review the hundreds of resumes they receive on a daily basis? We talked about that. We talked about the keywords. Like I said, I think, it's a two-way street, this whole internet, and the ease by which you can apply to jobs. The same goes for how many job applications that companies do receive, and they don't have the resources to go through them. It is what it is. So like I said, make sure that you optimize your resume to ensure that the keywords in your resume are going to reach, but you have to do it based on the job description. Because all job descriptions are different. I mean, they even call the same position something different. So you have to be able to understand that and be savvy enough within your industry to know another word for something so that you can include that word as well. Because their definition of what you think is the right word and their word is different. So good question, but I think we answered that. How do companies review? Oh, I think maybe you got the answer. How many pages should a resume be? I think, and this is just my personal opinion, if all of the stuff in your resume is relevant, it doesn't matter how many pages it should be. I think it's all about relevance. So if you're looking at it from your perspective, if I were a hiring manager, what would I want to know? And it's on your resume, it doesn't matter that it's everyone says, oh, it should be 2 pages long. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think I agree that we probably put too much information on a resume, and there's ways to say things in less words. And I think that, quite frankly, I think that there's got to be a combination of function, and there's got to be a good portion of accomplishment. Being able to kind of paint a story, this is my function. They expect that of you. If you're an accountant, they expect you to know how to do certain things. What they don't expect is to see, well, how did the work that I do or the function that I do create value for the division or for the practice, for the organization. So accomplishments are a really good thing to include, and you can either include them as part of the text of each job, or you can actually use a accomplishments section or special skills and accomplishments section to sort of highlight your resume at the top. So, like I said, I mean, everybody will tell you everybody has an opinion on how many pages a resume should be. I personally am one of those people that says relevance is going to tell the story. You don't have to put what country club you play golf at. You don't have to put, that you like to nap in the afternoons on a Sunday. All that stuff's irrelevant. What you can include is boards that you're on, even the community service, whatever stuff you do there, and just list it. You don't have to go into detail about it, but it just sort of defines that you're not just somebody that's just going to work, getting a paycheck, and going home at night. It might, make you a little bit more well-rounded.
Dan, I'm going to start the questions off because ageism is such an issue with our age bracket. What do you suggest, or how far back should we go on those resumes? What should we include?
Like I said, there's relevance. So think about it from my perspective. So as a professional in accounting and finance, for instance, there is a stigma that if you worked in a big four accounting firm or a national or global accounting firm, in their audit and advisory practice in some way, shape, or form, that you have qualifications that nobody else has. I don't ascribe to that, but the reality is it exists, right? I think that it's important that you list it, and maybe it's years past, so maybe you just put previous work experience, you don't include any dates. But you might say, Big Four, accounting and advisory firm, where and you could say staff auditor, senior auditor, senior manager, whatever it was. You don't have to put any more detail in that. But I think it's relevant because, like I said, there's a stigma that if you worked in Big Four, that you're going to be a great, controller, accountant, whatever you want to call it. So, that's an important feature. Now, if you don't necessarily, it doesn't really matter, then I would say you want to spend more time highlighting the stuff you've done most recently and minimizing the stuff that's dated. And I think that that's an important tale. I mean, but you don't want to forget where you came from, because if your first job that you list is CEO, they got to know where you came from. So you can't just have put on your resume the first job that's listed from 2001 to 2009, CEO of this company, because it doesn't show where you came from. How did you become the CFO? Were you our CEO? Were you an operations person? Were you a salesperson? Were you a CFO? Were you a strategic advisor? Were you an investment banking professional? So it's really a matter of understanding what that is. You don't have to go into great detail, but you have to list it so that people recognize, okay, he came up this way. She came up this way, right? That's important.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I know Rosemary's champing at the bit, and Judy has a question.
I've gotten I do a lot of answering on Indeed, and they have a section where, I want to put a cover letter or not a cover letter. You just went through it very briefly. What is your opinion on putting a cover letter in with an application?
It's fine to do it, but like I said before, it has to have some sort of an idea of what this job description is about, because they want to know why you're qualified for that job. So it's important that you highlight, hey, the job description says X. This is why I need to incorporate this wording, because that's what's going to be effective. I think you're better using a cover letter when you have gotten that introduction through referral. It's better to use a cover letter and the resume, or using the email and as a cover letter as well. I mean, it doesn't have to be as formal depending on the situation, but if you have been referred to a company, there's a reason why you're a fit for the job, and cover letters are very good for that in some cases, even when you do apply for a job where you don't necessarily have the referral, because here's why I'm a fit for that job. And that's why you got to include some words like that, because I said, like, these applicant tracking systems, they don't just appear on people's, emails. Christine sent her resume in, I'm going to look at it. No, there's key words that are going to be part of that cover letter and resume. It has to be consistent. And that's why you can't necessarily just send one resume. But if you do want to send one resume, then you have to include a cover letter that actually creates those other words that we talked about, so that when something comes up, your cover letter will pop up with your resume.
Well, I'm pretty much only obviously applying to the field that I've been in. So I highlight on the cover letter that I've done this, I've done that, I won't go into detail, blah, 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 blah. And then it says it on my application.
Have you checked for keywords? The keywords that you find are going to be most relevant to that career that you've had.
Right,
If
okay,
you're applying online, you've got to be cognizant about keywords. So think about 10 words that are going to define what you do, and think about different ways that could be interpreted. I get a lot of resumes or a lot of clients that say they need a VP of finance. Well, a VP of finance could mean a lot of, financial planning and analysis. It could mean strategic planning. It could be mergers and acquisitions. But it could also mean they want somebody who's an accounting resource. Well, that's not the same, so all of a sudden they really want somebody who's been a controller more so than they've been a VP of finance. They want somebody who's done, financial statements and financial reporting and, building models for investors and the GL and the balance sheet and income statement and cash flow statements. That's a different skill set than an operational finance resource that's a VP of finance. So you have to be aware that some companies don't call the same things the same things.
I have a question. You said, what is your skill set? And the companies that want that know what you are looking for. And when I hear that, it's and you go on a job board, it sounds as if you're looking for a job similar to what you have already or have had in the past, but with a different company.
Well, skill sets aside, you certainly progression means something too. So if you progress to certain levels of an organization, those are key words that you want to include. But I think that the essence of, if a manufacturing company is looking for a plant manager, they want to know that even if you're the VP of operations, they want to know that at some point you've dealt with plants before, right?
Right.
So they want to know that you either manage plants or whatnot. So you have to include a lot of different skill sets that are gonna play into whatever role you're looking to get.
Right. And so what you've spoken to is a person in that situation, and you've focused also on the importance of contacts, working your contacts. What if a person is new to this area and doesn't have any personal contacts? I'm sure you're aware of the fact that many people have moved to this Palm Beach County in the last few years. They're not all retirees, even if they are supposedly retired. Many of them have skills and experience that might be useful, particularly on an interim basis or a project basis or whatever. But they have nobody to talk to here. What would you suggest to them? Because they can go on LinkedIn and so forth. But what about that second piece?
Well, I think that given that there are a lot of niche players, and like I said, the information on the internet is so vast that you can identify companies down in South Florida that do what it is, or have, that have moved here even. We have companies moving here every day that have moved here that would be interested in people with your skill set. And good, better, and different. We haven't had the best reputation over the years of being the best mecca for quality of job candidates, to be honest. So a lot of people that come from, other places where like New York and places like that, where there's a, fast and furious kind of approach to work, they tend to look at people like that because they know they're getting somebody that's gone through the rat race, if you will, and that they're people that are working in the that they can relate to because they come from that. There's been this whole, it's obviously changing because Florida has become a lot, people have continued to move here over the years and it's become a mecca now. And because of the favorable tax situation here for, individuals and whatnot, they can move here and actually flourish. I mean, the high cost of living doesn't help, but people that are interested in coming to a place where there are going to be ample jobs, there are a lot of companies moving here, and a lot of the people that they have in their organizations are not making that move with them. So they're going to have to recruit an awful lot of people from this area. And what a better way than some of these people that have moved down here because remote work became so opportunistic during the pandemic. And now there's so many more opportunities to be either remote, where you can work for a company that's based in Toledo, Ohio, and still be living in South Florida. So with that being said, there's a lot more candidates for these jobs because if they are remote or they're going to be remote in nature for the most part, there's going to be a real premium on that. So and then also to answer the other side of your question is I think that you got to look at niche kind of, you can go on a LinkedIn and join groups, South Florida CFOs if you want. I mean, there are things like that, and they post a lot of interesting stuff. And if you post or you react to posts, people are going to start to recognize who you are. And therefore, you're sort of making your way into the world here in South Florida. And look, I would go to networking events as well. I know that's not everybody's favorite thing to do. It's not even my favorite thing to do, and I get paid to do that kind of stuff. But you got to kind of be uncomfortable a little bit and go and meet people that that are going to be interesting and people that you can listen to, that go to speakers and things of that nature, where there's going to be a group of people like you sitting in the room and network with those people.
Dan, if I could just turn that question I asked around a little bit, rather than the focus being matching your skill set and experience in a particular arena with what's being advertised out there. What's your thought about people being able to transfer skills in one area to a totally different area? And is there help for people in doing that? Sometimes I think people don't really understand that a skill set that they have and experience could be useful in a totally different area.
And again, this is going to be more relevant when you have an opportunity to speak to somebody that within the organization that you're looking to transfer those skills. I mean, first of all, look at it this way. You were a Girl Scout, right?
Yep.
Well, maybe when you were in Girl Scouts, you led a project for that, to raise money or to do whatever. Those project management skills could be relevant to a job that you're looking for. So that's why it's important to bring up those things. I mean, it doesn't always have to be specific to an organization or a job, but there are certain skill sets that are probably going to be relevant to a lot of different jobs. So if it's a project management job, the fact that you ran a project for Girl Scouts could be relevant. There's a lot of people that are going into entry-level jobs these days. They have no real experience to draw upon. So how do they do it? Well, they had to do it through maybe something they did at university, maybe something they did in high school. It can be relevant, so I think that's how you take those skill sets and be able to transfer them into other things, and I think that, again, it's a little more complicated to do that online unless you can identify and use the keywords and be able to back it up with what you're showing in your experience and the job description, to be able to get those words seen and brought up, so that when I'm looking for that resource, those 10 keywords are going to come up. right?
What are your thoughts about information interviewing with people as a way of identifying the areas where your skills could be transferred to rather than online searches?
Well, like I said, I mean, talking to people is so much more relevant than just, seeing a screen and being able to, talk to a computer. So like I said, that whole networking piece, that the 80-20 rule, who are these people in your network who can help you take those skills and transfer them into something else? They'll give you ideas. The more you listen, the more people are going to espouse, and they're going to be able to give you information that you didn't even know you knew about, or something you didn't know about, or something that's relevant. And you were like, wow, that's really important. So like I said, talking to people is far more effective than talking to the computer. So maybe taking what you learn on the computer and asking people about the relevance of that is going to be very important.
And we have a few more questions waiting here. So we'll start with Larry.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Christine. We appreciate the webcast. I sent you an invite, Dan, on LinkedIn, because mine's a little bit more niche. You and I think I spoke to Carol Stewart from your organization.
Okay.
And I come across, I train CPAs all over the country, but I also am a tax attorney and a CPA down here. But I'm a very, very high level. I come in like, I don't need partner, but I come in and I'm a 1099. So I'll explain it when we communicate. It's more complex. So, but I do very, very high level work. I mean, I do very complicated work. Usually the partners can't even do the work I do. So, so it's that kind of thing. And I don't know whether there's a lot of ageism though. Large firms, I've approached all kinds of firms and said, look, I could do this on a 1099 basis. There's a reason for that. And then either they don't want to do the 1099 or they want somebody full time or this or that or whatever the case may be, but it's very complicated. You'll see on my LinkedIn, when you see my LinkedIn, I have almost 5,000 LinkedIns. And so, I have a lot of background. So, and I have taught firms down here. So, that's the gravitas is there. So we'll go back and forth, but I think there's a lot of ageism. It's just very difficult to overcome the ageism. I want to get into this whole thing about overcoming the ageism. I think that's very difficult. I just don't know how people do it. By the way, as far as the question Rosemary was asking about coming across, Reverend Bowles' book on What Color's Your Parachute has some good discussions on that. But yeah, I'd like some more on how you handle the ageism issue.
Well, I mean, it sounds to me, Larry, like you have an expertise that you could actually, like you said, deploy to other organizations. I would think that you'd see less ageism as a consultant than you would as a, looking for a full-time job. And I think there's, it's a great example of what I do at StevenDouglas is that I hire people like you who go out and do projects for clients. And what I do is, I actually have a platform by which we do where people can join our organization. They go out on projects, but they can actually enjoy the same benefits that I as a corporate employee have, which includes paid time off and holiday pay and subsidized healthcare. You can do that in a W-2 fashion. And I'll tell you the reason why that some companies may not want to do 1099 is that over the years, it's become a little bit more difficult to define yourself as a 1099 for tax purposes. And you know that probably more than I do.
Yes.
So a lot of these hiring practices at these large organizations, they don't want to hire people with 1099s because they want somebody else to protect the people that are coming out there, and to deal with a firm that actually, that has some structure to it. And the Department of Labor has gotten very strict on defining what's a 1099 and what's not a 1099.
Right.
And a lot of companies don't want to get involved. They want to only deal with companies that they know employ people that are working first. So they don't want you to be a 1099 independently for that company. They want you to go through a firm like ours, like my group.
Yeah, and you'll share that back with me, the link and stuff, because I also talk to CPAs all the time. So
Sure, of course.
that'd be helpful. All right, thank you very much.
Susan said in her experience, most recruiters using an ATS don't read cover letters. Are you seeing something different?
And I don't. It's the same concept. Like I said, if you know, thank you, Susan. I know Susan, so it's very nice to see a friendly face. Anyways, it's a great question. Like I said to you before, yes, the ATSs are not necessarily going to see them. So if you're just applying for a job, like I said, unless your cover letter has those keywords that are going to be important for somebody that's searching for that job, it's not going to show up. So, you know, that's why I say you have to really kind of look at the job, and you have to be able to apply with those keywords. And if you are going to use a cover letter, and I said using a cover letter is probably more so if you're being represented by somebody, whether it be a friend through LinkedIn that's putting your resume in front of that person, where a cover letter will be relevant. But you know, a resume doesn't always stand on its own. And I agree with Susan that a lot of these ATSs are not necessarily picking up. That's why the keywords are really important in a cover letter, because they're going to be the same as what would pop you up on a resume. So, you know, and maybe that's the way you can actually use different words on the cover letter and the resume to make sure that one of those is going to get popped up so that they can see both the cover letter and the resume.
Thank you. Okay, and Carmen, you'll be our last question.
So, you know, I was wondering what your thoughts were on the sites that they post ads, but then you go and then you have to pay. And I just think, especially for older people, you can get, it's so easy to get scammed, like ExecuNet and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's why, I mean, you got to kind of limit yourself to the ones that are, if you just go on and click on everything on the internet, you're going to get scammed somewhere along the line. It's a matter of how it works. And a lot of those ads and whatnot are going to just, they want to create a database of people that they could take advantage of. You got to look at the ones that are real. That's why I look at, you know, if you're in a defined industry, you should really look at those that are a little bit more niche focused, because you're going to find that those are a lot more legitimate. And, you know, I think that, you know, obviously the career builders, the monsters, the ones that you've heard about, know about, don't click on the things that are advertising in there. I would go to their websites indirectly rather than clicking on anything in particular, because you know that how those algorithms work these days, you know, with you know, they're just grabbing whatever information they can to put you in a list of people that they're going to contact for whatever reason. So yes, I would urge you not to click on anything that's just on a site. I would go to the websites of those particular companies and see if they're legitimate, rather than actually clicking on something that could potentially, you know, create a situation that's tough to get out of.
So what I think you're saying is if I, like, let's say ExecuNet as an example, you see an ad for XYZ company, go to XYZ company and apply on their website versus going to that third party.
100%.
Thanks.
100%. If you can. That's why I'm uncomfortable putting my resume. I would be uncomfortable putting my resume on a website like even a Monster, because you're going to get, people are going to see that resume and they're going to take it and they're going to use whatever algorithms they can to target you in a way that it's important that you protect yourself a little bit with that as well.
Okay, what a great presentation, Dan. Lots of great information. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for participating. And we will have the recording up and probably within the week. So feel free to share it because it was really great information. And we thank you all. Rosemary, thank you for hosting. And without further ado, have a great Wednesday, everyone.